I literally would hammer in my own signs when I first founded my brokerage and did everything on a shoestring budget. I founded it in 2010, and that was not necessarily the greatest of times economically. And I eventually added in my first advisor in 2018
Hmm.
and eventually grew over 4 years to almost 10.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I'm your host, as always, Yona Weiss. Grateful to be here today with another awesome guest. We have the one and only Amy Calandrino on the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
I am too. You've come a long way, done a lot of things. One of the most common denominators of this show is people in real estate, some way or another, right? You've been in the brokerage business for 15 years, doing a lot of things, or even more than that probably. But you've come to a kind of crossroads in your career, and so that's kind of a hook for people who want to know what's going on right now. But before we get to that, Amy, why don't you tell us a little bit of a background of who you are, what you do, what and how you got to where you've gotten to, and then we'll kind of take it from there, see where it leads us.
Sure. So the Reader's Digest version is we don't have a few hours. You could always pick up my book to get the granular detail, but
Which is called the
From
book.
Perfect to Real.
There you
From
go.
Perfect to Real, it's called. It's available on Amazon and many other fine bookstores. So I'm originally from Vermont. My family came down here to Florida when I was 5. I like to tell people I've been in Orlando since before it was cool. Orlando has grown wildly since I've been here. It was a few 100,000 people in the MSA back then, a lot of agricultural, and then now it's grown into be a thriving city with more than 2 million people in the MSA, and it's incredible to be here. But I went to school here. I stayed in Orlando to go to college. I graduated from Rollins College in Winter Park. One thing that's interesting about me is I worked full time and went to school full time. I started working full time when I was 13 years old. So I saved enough money to put myself through college along with scholarships, and
Wow.
actually graduated from college with zero college debt. So my first real big break was working in a law office where I actually got to eventually, when my husband merged into a firm, I worked alongside my husband, my now husband. I got
Okay.
to meet one of the attorneys that was involved in the acquisition of the land for Disney, who was a great person who saw the potential in me and stopped and said,
Hmm.
you're behind the desk doing this paralegal work. Maybe you need to get out from behind the desk and meet these people. And that's when I really started networking, meeting people. And then I eventually got into commercial real estate. Working in the law office, I noticed two things. One is people that had made horrific commercial real estate decisions and needed the law firm to help extricate them from that or take them out of it.
Yeah.
And then the second thing was when things went really well, seeing the wealth that people created through real estate, and that really interested me. And I found that there was kind of a gap in the Orlando marketplace. There wasn't a lot of people that worked on more families and small and medium-sized businesses. So that's kind
Right.
of how I got into commercial real estate, what I did, where I'm from. And yeah, what I do is help small, medium-sized businesses create generational wealth and help them to continue to grow their enterprises, which thereby benefits our overall Orlando economy.
That's an amazing Reader's Digest version. Like, I think you summed up your life like quicker than I think anyone else has ever done on the show in such a succinct way. I'm sure you didn't even leave out anything. So we can just move on. No, I'm just kidding. But you were a business owner. You founded your own firm and 15 years strong in doing that. And just recently, as I mentioned in the hook, made a somewhat big transition for you. Tell us a little bit about that process, if you would, and what's going on.
Yeah, so I started the brokerage and it was just me. I was head cook, bottle washer, all the things like I would say. And
Mhm.
I literally would hammer in my own signs when I first founded my brokerage and did everything on a shoestring budget. I founded it in 2010. And that was not necessarily the greatest of times economically. And I eventually added in my first advisor in 2018
Mm.
and eventually grew over 4 years to almost 10. What I found during that time, while also having children at that time, is that completely took me out of brokerage. And it also took away all my joy because my joy is like talking to the local business owner. Where is your business at now? Where do
Right.
you want to go? How does commercial real estate fit into this? Instead, I'm telling people, hey, I can't cut your check. You didn't put all the paperwork into the CRM and
Hmm.
you weren't supposed to do things that way. And like I had a few good agents, but a lot that it required a lot of babysitting
Hmm.
and it was a lot of expense and a lot of time. And so I eventually kind of scaled back to just kind of me and a few other people. So I think we're like 5 people for like the last few years. But then I found that just like the business owners that I counsel, that's just kind of a weird place to be. Is
Mm.
you have all of the infrastructure to have this company, but
Right.
then I didn't really want to scale it. And so then what was I really doing? And so, so I would, sometimes put my kids down in front of the TV on Sundays to watch Disney while I'm doing QuickBooks on the weekend. And I'm like, this is kind of crazy. Like that I'm trying to do all these deals, give the
Hmm.
clients all this attention, but then I still have to kind of tend to the brokerage.
Right.
And so I talked to my friend Sarah Malcolm, that many people may know, and told her kind of my conundrum. And then she recommended I talk to Allison Weiss, who recommended that I talk to Beth Azor. And I consulted some of the most prolific people in commercial real estate. And they said, yeah, Amy, like, why are you putting yourself through all this just to have a brokerage? Because at the end of the day, even if you go to this large conglomerate or any other brokerage, you're still a 1099. You're your own person within that organization. And
Mm.
I'm still an entrepreneur. My family has a foundation. We own like our own holding company that owns our own, commercial real estate. I own my company that does the publishing for my book. I'm still an entrepreneur. I've
Hmm.
just decided I'd rather use my bandwidth in a different way and be more intentional about my time.
Right.
And so I went through this entire process. I was a free agent, as Beth Azor told me to be, and open-minded because I did not visualize myself going to a global brokerage. I
Mm.
thought, here I am, this hyper local boutique brokerage girl. Like, how would
Right.
I go there? But what I found is every brokerage is kind of different, and every office within a brokerage is different. And the Orlando office for Cushman is very well, I think Cushman as a whole is very entrepreneurial. Like, when I open up my laptop, says drive. And the E in drive stands for entrepreneurial. Like they're
Hmm.
very entrepreneurial. So I really like the people in the office. I really thought that they understood me as a whole person of how my podcast works, how
Right.
my influencing and helping to inspire, others, especially working moms,
Hmm.
to show up in the best way possible for their families was really valued. And so that's where I landed.
That's amazing. It's funny because there are, like you said, there's a lot of different types of brokerages out there. And even if you're going from like a small boutique where you're running your own business and everything and doing everything basically to going to a big firm, you still have a lot on your plate to take care of, but a lot of the nitty-gritty things you don't really have to worry about as much. And you're more focus, I think is what you're saying. Focus on the things that you actually did enjoy doing. And I think that's something that a lot of people get stuck in their careers, and even if it's your own business, right? Like perfect example, you're not in a career where you're working for someone else. You're in a career you're working for yourself, but it wasn't giving the same fulfillment that you had started with and you were enjoying. And kudos to you for kind of taking that accounting. And what I read from you had a summary that you wrote up the other day about this online, which was you really took an accounting. I mean, you wrote a book, right? And then basically took that book and was like, wait
Yes.
a second, that book is, from perfect to real. Like, I'm not being real with myself right now, you know?
Yeah.
And I got to live up to, what I wrote about. And so I think that's very eye-opening to take that kind of introspection, which I think a lot of people don't take time to do that. Very
It's
fascinating.
very interesting. I've gotten a lot of private messages that I'm not alone and that there is a huge weight of having, a brokerage, especially a small independent brokerage.
Hmm.
And there's a lot involved with it. And it's not easy, especially when you're the chief rainmaker and all of that. And so you only have a certain amount of energy, and it's like, what are your priorities? For me, it's faith, family, fitness, and finances. And finances, well, it's like the fourth is important. I also felt like I could be the most financially secure making this transition too, and not
Hmm.
be as subject to, if I stayed a very small size, if I lost one person, that's a big deal. And then it's going to take a huge time to bring in that other person versus if I'm in a larger organization, I'm much more insulated
Yeah.
and I'm not going to have as much of like the whiplash and the ebbs and flows. And so that was definitely part of it. And it is interesting. Yeah. You could write this book, but then are you going to take your own advice and live your life with purpose? So that's what I decided to do.
It's hard. It's hard to do that because it's a big step for a lot of people. Like it's one thing to, say, oh yeah, practice what you preach, so to speak, but it's another thing to really listen to yourself sometimes and take an accounting, which is something a lot of people don't do. But I commend you for that and making such a big change. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's a big change. I don't know how big it is. Obviously, you're going through it, but it's a big change. And so I think what the amazing thing about commercial real estate, and especially with our online community, is that with the influencers and everything like that, you have your own personal brand. So it doesn't really matter what the name of
Yes.
your company is. Like if you asked, 100 people that knew you, right, but didn't actually work with you per se, they wouldn't know the name of your company. They just know, hey, you're Amy Calandrino. You sell commercial real estate in Central Florida, and you're, an entrepreneur, and etc. So it doesn't really matter what the
Right.
name that you're kind of hanging up your name tag on, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember too, I went to my husband and he has his own company and his own law firm. And I remember saying, I think I've decided I'm gonna hang this up and do something else. He's like, I've been telling you that for about a year. I'm like,
Oops.
whoops. I remember that. He's like, because he says you put so much effort and so much energy into it, recruiting interns, recruiting
Yeah.
agents, and finding the right team and building the systems. And we were going through a whole nother iteration of doing the manual again and all the things again.
Right.
And then the website broke again, and all the fun things that you deal with, like as an entrepreneur. And then I was like, all right, I'm good. Like,
Time to move on. What's your favorite thing about commercial real estate in your day to day?
wow. What is my favorite thing in my day to day? I like when you're taking a property or an area and you're making it something new. I mean, there's one thing, like I represent a lot of attorneys that will buy an office building, right?
Hmm.
And they're just, and it was another law firm before, and that's perfectly fine, right? And trying to find them the best office building in the best location, right? That's okay. But then when you take, like, I do retail, so I do
Hmm.
retail and office mixed use. I'm working on a deal at a mortuary, like, and we're gonna be making it like this box that's here, like this 5,000 square foot box, like putting a hair salon on one side, and then figuring out who's the right tenant on the other side, and making something, I mean, quote unquote dead, something like brand new. So I really love that ideation. And that was a big reason I went to Cushman, so that I could like do a lot more of that
Right.
development and get more into that adaptive reuse and revisioning and all of that. And then being alongside my clients, like during that process, during the acquisition, and then helping them to lease it up and then figuring out what they're doing. And then as they accumulate a portfolio, what's really cool too is going back to my clients and it's like, okay, here's the properties that we acquired. this is where this one's at, this one's where this one at. Do you want to do a refi on
Hmm.
that? And where's everything at? And so
Right.
now that I've been doing this for a long time, I've accumulated a nice book of business and being able to go back to those clients and like, where are you at now? Is everything good? Kind of almost like a financial advisor is really good about going back to their clients on a regular basis. That's how I treat my business.
Sure. Yeah, and commercial real estate owners, you have, like you said, you'll have the one-offs where a guy's buying a building or doing something and it's a one thing. But then you have commercial real estate investors who oftentimes are buying multiple buildings a year, or even a month,
Yes.
depending on the size of them, right? So you
Yeah.
you definitely working with them, I could see the joy in what that does and kind of bringing, in your case, bringing a building back alive, and bringing life to it in a whole new way. So love that. Love that adaptive reuse. I love to see kind of new, buildings come and go and they change ownership and then you'll see like revitalization of thing. And that's amazing with retail especially. You don't see that as much with office. You may see a redevelopment or something like that, but it's
Right.
definitely different with that.
I kind of like having a little bit of both, and they're often seen together, so it just kind of works hand in hand.
They
Yeah.
are, yeah, absolutely. And you'll have, I mean, I have a lot of clients also that own both. They own retail, they own office, and whatever works, right? I guess it
Yeah.
works for them. Now you have also, you mentioned kind of parenthetically, you've been hosting a podcast for a few years, the Performance Mindset podcast, right? I'm sure that's a great kind of sounding board also for some of these ideas of how do you're speaking to people who are successful business owners or successful entrepreneurs
Yeah.
and getting these ideas of, oh, okay, this is what I should do, or this is how I should change things.
Yeah, I found that the podcast has served a couple different purposes for me. One is that I can get really excited about something and then I tend to like jump in and like I sometimes cut people off. I don't mean to, but I think the podcast has taught me a little bit more patience and listening, and so I've become better at that. It's not completely gone away, but it's just because I think my brain works at a certain like frequency and speed that I'll hear something and then I already kind of I'm listening, but then I'm already ideating. I can't stop myself. I'm one
Mhm.
of those people that my brain is like always on.
Right.
So I think that it's made me a better listener. And again, that's made me a bit more introspective. But yes, secondly, as I do go back and I listen to the podcasts I've done, because like when you're in it, I'm taking notes and I'm learning, but then going back and listening again, I'm picking up lessons. Like,
Yeah.
with Allison Weiss, it's like one of the things I picked up from us talking today, and the key piece of advice that came out is like, you should not make a transition unless you know what you want. If you don't know who you are and what you want, why are you going to make a transition until you have clarity around that?
Right.
And she said, what was interesting about me is like, I had clarity on what I wanted. And so then I was able to do that. But yeah, I think coming up with different ideas, being able to speak about a number of different topics, a lot of commercial real estate as well,
Hmm.
is so cool.
Yeah. I mean, and it's such a great name for a podcast. How did you come up with that name, the Performance Mindset? Like, what was driving you, pushing you towards that?
Yeah, so I came up with it. What came first? So I came up with, first of all, when I was going through a reorganization of my company, when I thought I was going to keep kind of scaling in 2022, I came up with what's called the Sport Success System, SPORT. And S stands for synergistic,
Mm-hmm.
P stands for persistent, O is omniscient, like in always wanting to kind of learn. R is radical and T is tautological. It's like habit stacking and rinsing
Oh.
and repeating. And so I kind of came up with that. I love sports. I've always enjoyed watching, sports and learning about sports and the mindset of people. And then I noticed a lot of people that are highly successful in sports or in business and otherwise have a growth mindset. And I'm like, well, that's kind of like a performance mindset of
Mm.
sorts.
Right.
I was actually kind of surprised that there are some kind of like high performance show or this other show, but no
Right.
one had trademark performance mindset. So there it is. And then it tied into the sports success system and away we go.
It's so funny. I'm curious because when you're looking for a new podcast, I don't know, Apple or Spotify, whatever, like suggest new shows all the time, right? I wonder like people are looking for sports or looking for things like that, that your podcast comes up as a suggestion. And
Yeah, so I looked at my stats last night. 54% of people are in the US.
mhm.
37% of people listen from the UK, and the rest
So
of it is
interesting.
globally.
Wow,
Isn't that interesting?
that's fascinating.
I thought it'd just be my friends.
Right.
It's a lot, right?
It's fascinating. I also I used to look at the stats a lot also, and I like it was like 72 different countries, like people listening to your podcast. Like
Yeah.
what? Who in Bahrain is listening to, Weiss advice? Like what is going on? But apparently there are, who knows? It's great. Love
Well,
to
it's
hear it.
global.
It is, and listen, a lot of the lessons are universal, right? And a lot of the conversations, they're stories, and this is relatable to really anyone. If you're in any business whatsoever, you don't have to be in real estate. You don't have to be in commercial real estate. Frankly, you don't have to even be in business whatsoever. It's, something you can learn if you're a parent, if you're, a teacher, if you're anything, you can learn different things just by listening to it. Obviously, someone's got to have a lot of time in their hands to listen to so many podcasts, but, but, it's, you got to pick and choose, but there's definitely value to be had there. So, congratulations on that. And it's something that I've also learned over the years about listening, as you mentioned, and learning how to, kind of have those conversations where you're picking up on the cues from the other person, you're able to ask the relevant questions, and it really does tie back into running your own business and performing well in that space as well. So love to hear that. Love to hear that. So what do you see going on? Obviously, you're at a brand new, like literally brand new at the time of this recording. And actually, this will go out pretty soon after we record this, so that's good news. And then, so where do you see yourself, in the next kind of this phase, this new chapter, so to speak?
Yeah, so even though I'm at a large global brokerage, I'm going to keep my hyper local focus. I do a lot in Orlando, especially within the various districts. We have a lot of interesting little districts within Orlando, all with their own personalities,
Hmm,
and all of them have a lot of like office and retail and communities like Winter Park. And so I am committed to staying kind of focused on the areas that I have been, as well as just helping more small business owners create that generational wealth for their families. And I realize from my own experience how transformative that can be. And I first wanted to invest in commercial real estate in 2009, but I talked myself out of it again and again and again. And it took me until 2019 to buy my first building, which I sold in 2022 and then 1031 into two buildings and then renovated one and then rented that out and about to renovate the other and rent it out. We used them kind of for our businesses for a while. That's a great way to get started if you have a business and have owner
sure.
occupied real estate. So now that I've kind of been there, done that, and have done that for my family and created this wealth opportunity for us, I feel like too, I'm better positioned to counsel those I
Sure.
serve. And so if a business is cash flowing and it makes sense for them to become their own landlord, they actually absolutely should. And in some cases, it doesn't make sense. If you're just like this big franchise rollout and you're trying to gobble up as many locations you can, obviously it doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
Because that, is going to suck up a lot of your capital. But acquiring commercial real estate is a nice, like more long-term play, typically for owner user, small business owners. So where do I see just remaining on that? What I love is already my teammates know what's my jam, right? What's
Mm.
Amy's jam in the office? They already know. They're like, "Oh, you're the Winter Park girl." One of the other things, I'm like, yes, yes, I do so much like there in the, so I'm going to keep, even though I have global resources, my hyper local focus, they remain committed to small business owners. If we get big corporations and REITs that come in, I have other teammates to help with that. I am the person that wants to just like shake hands typically with who I work with. Most of my companies that I work with are from about 2 to 20 million in gross sales. And then I have
Mm.
some outliers that might be more like I have one that's like 75 million a year, and I have maybe two or three that are above 100 million a year. So, yeah.
It's so important, especially being a part of the community. You live there, you work there, you've had a lot of experience, right? You want to be seen as like someone, in the community, who's adding value, who's a resource to small business owners. I think it's so important. I mean, small businesses are really like the backbone of this country, and I love it. I love the fact that that's kind of your focus because it's it's something that's unique. You know, you have a lot of different brokers who are, focusing on a lot of different things, but focusing on small business owners who need those spaces to really expand and profit. There's so many things that come into running your own business, and I think you having done that can help, like you said, help advise others doing the same. There's
Oh, and let's be real, like too, like at the end of the day, a lot of these small business owners are looking to eventually grow their business
mhm.
and sell to private equity and and that they may not always be a business owner. Things kind of change in business. And, I know now from my own journey, how things could. And the other thing I would like to do next year is we used to run this program called the Aspiring Entrepreneurs Program through my husband's law firm, where we would take fifth graders to various small businesses in the community and they would learn about how that business works and, how did they generate profit? Like, how does it work operationally? We even went to
Oh,
like a plumbing company and they would learn, how that business ran and they earned like an entrepreneur certificate. So now, because we had like buses that were donated for us and we had lunches that wanted to be donated to us, like we decided to set up a 501(c)(3). And so now we have that set up. But I've been so busy running my business that I haven't been able to like do it. And now in
mm,
2026, I'm bringing the program back under our foundation. And so I'm going to start lining up and building like a committee for that to have a great program. And I think this year we'll probably definitely go to a bank and talk about financial literacy, which
mm,
is so important.
sure.
So my first step in our foundation is bringing back the Aspiring Entrepreneur Program that was a huge success. Some of the kids that went through it are now in like middle school, high school. So maybe even bringing them back as volunteers, which would be really awesome to do.
Hmm.
And then in future years, like 2027 and beyond, potentially like doing more high school financial literacy. And then further on down the road, my goal is potential like micro grants for small businesses and stuff like that. So
Love that.
that is why I wanted to reallocate my time.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That sounds like you do have
That's
a
a much
plan.
bigger impact than just having a brokerage to say I had a brokerage. So,
Right.
now I can utilize that time in a different way.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Wow, amazing. Your story is really starting to unfold. You thought it was well along the way. Well, it's really opening a new leaf. And we'll see where it takes you. But that's very exciting to hear, Amy. Thanks for coming on the show, Sharon. I'd love to transition now to what we call the final four. These are four questions I ask all my guests. And the first one for you is, what is the worst job that you ever had?
Easy. Newspaper delivering. I would be in the back of a van and I'd have to stuff inserts into the bags and then like throw them to the front of the van so that the man driving the car could throw. I lost my cookies so many times. It was awful. So that was the worst job ever.
Oh my goodness. That sounds horrible. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm just imagining that for a second, but we'll move on. Second question, what's a book you've read that's giving you a paradigm shift?
Well, because I've listened to your podcast, I knew this question was coming. Heard about the Five Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. Highly accessible author, by the way. If you tag him on Twitter and say you're reading his book, he may even like DM you back. But I heard about that through Nick Huber and several other people on X, and that really helped guide me in again looking at your time as a resource and like how do you want to spend your time and just
Hmm.
incredible.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll check that out. I've first time I've heard it. Obviously, I know who he is from also from X and LinkedIn and stuff. A very inspirational influencer who's gained traction during the pandemic. Basically, he and Nick and a few other guys just basically blew up during that
Yeah.
time period. But yeah, definitely check it out. The Five Levels of Wealth. We'll put it in the show notes also if anyone wants to check that out. And third question, what's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
So I wanted to about 10 years ago learn German, but then I realized that I wouldn't really use it a lot. But now I have I want to do it again. Like I want to learn another and so be able to speak to my grandmother and my mother and other people. My family is originally from there. But
Oh,
when
wow.
I last wanted to do it, I ended up using my time to learn piano, which I did. I did 5 years of piano and now I can play piano. So
That's amazing.
I feel like I can do whatever I want to do. So I'm going to learn German once I get through this transition.
Well, for sure. There you go. Well, that's awesome. Learning a language is very, 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 what's the word I'm looking for? My brain's kind of not working today. So, well, it's challenging. It is, but it's very rewarding also because it really opens up your brain to function in a different way. Yeah. So that's also amazing that you have people to talk to in your family that
Yeah.
speak that language. So that's helpful if they're willing, right? Third and fourth and final question, what does success mean to you?
Success to me is serving my clients in the best way possible and knowing each and every day that I've put forth the most amount of effort that I can. I never want to phone it in. And so
Mm,
that's really what success looks like to me, knowing that I've always given it my best and I haven't left anything on the table and done the best job advocating for those I serve.
love that. Very, very impactful words. I think I agree with that. That's something I hold dear to my heart also. You know, want to really be the best, create the best, and provide the best value that I can for my clients as well. So I definitely relate to those words. Never heard that definition, and that's why I love the question, is everyone gives their own definition, a little bit different. So thank you for that. And finally, where can our listeners find you or reach out to you if they want?
Well, the best way is LinkedIn. I do read all the messages that come in, unless you're trying to spam me. Like, hey,
Yeah.
it's so nice. Here's my link to schedule a time. But if you're like, hey, I heard you on Wife's Advice, I want to connect, we'll totally respond to that. Of course, you can also email me, amy.calandrino, Calandrino, at cushwake.com. So is my new email.
New domain, new email. Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes also. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show and good luck to you with this amazing new endeavor. And I wish you much continued success with that.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. And to our listeners, thank you guys for tuning in once again all the way to the end. And until next time, remember the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.